XVA. So today we are going to discuss about XVAs. So first we will start with the hook. Two banks agree on a derivative trades. On paper, the math says it worth exactly $10 million. But the actual price the bank quote each other is different. Sometimes noticeably different. Why? Because the textbook price ignore a bunch of real world cost and risk that only show up once you actually have to manage the trade for years. Those adjustments have a name, XVAs. I will show you what XVAs are, why they exist, and what each of the major one actually means. XVAs are adjustment that turns a textbook derivative price into a real price bank actually charge each other. The simple definition. XVA stand for X value adjustment, where the X is a placeholder for different letters, each representing a different real world cost or risk baked into a price of a derivative. Think of it like buying a car. The sticker price is the base number, but once you add insurance, financing cost, and maintenance risk, the real cost of owning that car is higher and more complicated than the sticker suggests. XVAs are the financial industry's way of saying the textbook formula gives you a starting point. Now let's adjust it for everything that formula doesn't capture. XVAs adjust a derivative theoretical price to reflect real cost and risk the basic formula leaves out, like sticker price uses true cost of ownership. Why this even matters? Counterparty risk. To understand why XVAs exist, remember sometimes from our previous videos, derivatives are private agreement between two parties, not something you just own outright. That means every derivatives carry counterparty risk. The risk the other side can't or won't pay when the time comes. Before the 2008 financial crisis, many banks priced derivatives mostly using the textbook formula and largely ignored the risk, assuming major banks simply won't fail. Then Lehman Brothers collapsed, and suddenly the other side might not pay, stopped being a theoretical footnote and become a very real, very expensive problem. That single event in a big reason, XVS become a core part of how banks priced derivatives today. Because derivatives depend on the other party actually paying the risk that they won't need to be priced in. And 2008 made the risk impossible to ignore. The big one is CVA. The most important XVA is CVA, Credit Valuation Adjustment. CVA is the cost of possibilities that your counterparty defaults before the trade is finished, leaving you with a loss. Here's the intuition. If you own money on a trade and there are some chance the other side goes bankrupt before paying you, the trade is worth less to you than the textbook price suggested because there's a chance you never fully collect. So CVA, simple formula for CVA, the value you lose weighted by the chance your counterparty actually defaults. The riskier the counterparty and the longer the trade runs, the bigger the CVA and the more it eats into the trade value. CVA is the cost of your counterparty possibility defaulting before the trade finish. Riskier counterparties means a bigger CVA. The mirror image, DVA. Now flip the perspective. If you might default, that's a cost of your counterparty, but strangely, it can work out as a benefit to you on paper. This is DVA, Debt Valuation Adjustment. DVA reflects the idea that if your firm defaults, You won't have to pay everything you own either. So, from a pure accounting standpoint, you won't default risk slightly reduce your own liability. This one tends to confuse people and for good reason. It is real accounting effect, but it also controversial since benefiting on paper from your own risk of default feels strange and it doesn't help you if you actually do default. DVA is the mirror of CVA. Your own default risk reduce what you technically owe, which show up a paper benefit even though it is a strange one. The other major XVA equity. CVA and DVA gets the most attention, but several other XVAs matter too. First one is FVA, funding valuation adjustment. The cost of actual funding a trade. If a bank needs to borrow money to post collateral or support a position, that borrowing is not free. FVA capture that funding cost. MVA, margin valuation adjustment. Many derivatives require posting initial margin. Collateral set asset upfront as a safety buffer. MBA is the cost of funding that looked up collateral over the life of the trade. Finally, KVA, capital valuation adjustment. Regulators require bank to hold capital reserves against the risk of derivatives they hold. KVA reflects the cost of that required capital. Money the bank cannot use elsewhere because it sets aside from regulatory sake. Notice the pattern across all these. Each one takes a real cost: credit risk, funding, collateral, regulatory capital, and turns into a specific calculatable adjust to price. Why banks take all this so seriously? Put together, XVA can meaningfully change the price of derivatives, sometimes shifting it enough to make or break whether the trade is profitable at all. That's why most large banks have entire dedicated XVA desk team whose entire job is calculating these adjustments, hedging the risk they represent, and making sure the bank is not quietly underpricing the true cost of its derivative. It also why XVA becomes such a big deal after 2008. Regulatory wants to make sure banks were pricing in real risk upfront rather than discovering them the hard way during the next crisis.